One of the biggest things that causes people anxiety, particularly in a work environment, is the feeling like they do not have enough time. The feeling like there's too much on their plate, there's no way to manage it, and they have no idea how they're going to actually produce a high quality of work while also being able to keep their head on straight, right? I see the same pattern happen for the clients that I have who are stay-at-home parents as well, right? You've got all of these different things to manage, you've got all these different roles to play, you've got all of these different responsibilities to meet. How in the world do you do it in a way that reduces anxiety? Well, I want to share with you a very simple time management system that I've never seen not reduce the anxiety of somebody that's actually used it. So it's a very simple concept, and as is the case with anything, the actual utility of it is going to be demonstrated as you apply it. So it may sound good and useful to you, but unless you actually create a conditioning mechanism for yourself where you are consistently applying this method on a regular basis, you're not going to retrain your brain to look at your time management in the way that's really necessary in order to avoid a pattern of anxiety on the long term. So here's what you want to do. Firstly, when you're going into work or you're starting your day, most people are asking themselves the question, what do I have to do? And not only are they asking themselves that question, which immediately causes them to get stressed because they're imagining their day in terms of responsibilities that they have, but they very often will actually contemplate what they have to do all at once, meaning their brain is trying to chunk 10 or 12 different items all at the same time. And that is one of the fastest ways to induce an emotional reaction of anxiety. Anxiety can be understood really as, in most cases, your nervous system responding to an overstimulation. Okay? And that overstimulation comes in how you're processing information. So if you start your day and you're thinking, what are all the things I have to do? Well, I got to do this and that and this and this and this and this and that. And you're trying to keep all 10 of those things in your scope of vision at the same time inside your mind, it's going to become overwhelming to you. Okay? It's going to become, you're essentially going to arrive at this conclusion of how in the world could I do all that? Okay? And that's going to be what causes the state of anxiety, where you're feeling a sense of overwhelm, like you can't do it, yet you must do it. So what we want to do is chunk that down, first of all, and make sure we're focusing in smaller bits of information, because you can actually do something valuable when you're focusing on a smaller bit of information. You can focus on one thing and make sure you absolutely crush it, for example. But the other thing that we want to do is we want you to ask a different question. Instead of asking, what do I have to do? We want you to ask, what do I really want? And I want you to think in terms of outcomes that you really have, okay? Because most people go into work in a state of reaction, okay? This is what I call the reaction mindset versus the intention mindset. If you're going into your day with a state of reaction where you're going to respond to emails and other people's demands and the projects that have been assigned to you only, and you're going to view your management of your time based off of how quickly you can simply meet other people's needs in order to hopefully have a little left over for yourself, that's not going to really serve you. Well, instead, we want to create a reframe around how you're looking at your time. And we want to look at it not in terms of the things you have to do, but in terms of the outcomes you want, right? So let's take the typical example, something that stresses a lot of people out, going to a boardroom meeting, okay? Taking an hour to go do a meeting that you may find to be unnecessary. Well, most people are thinking, okay, well, that's something I have to do. I have to go to that meeting. The other problem is when people are at the meetings, there very often is not a very clear outcome, right? There's no one who's saying, okay, look, here's the very specific thing that we're here to solve, and as soon as we solve it, everyone's done, right? We're gone. Instead, we have these arbitrary time limits set for meetings where we automatically say, well, we're going to take 60 minutes on this or 90 minutes on this. And very often at the end of the meeting, you're nowhere closer to getting something solved than you were at the beginning, right? So instead, if you change the way in which you're focusing on bits of information and you instead say, what's my outcome here? Then you're going to be able to drill down to that very quickly. And it means that once the outcome is accomplished, you get a state of actual fulfillment and closure, right? A state in which you're going to have a little microscopic antidote to any anxiety that you might have otherwise felt. So we want you first of all to say, what are the key outcomes I have to accomplish today? And I recommend you pick no more than 3, right? So your outcomes may be, I need to follow up with all of my existing clients and make sure they're supported during the changing time that they're in right now. Number 2, I need to make sure I am aligned with my supervisor about what my directives are for the next 2 weeks. And then number 3, I need to make sure that I clear any things on my priority list that are absolutely not oriented around those core deliverables, okay? Now, you get those 3 things done, that's a pretty good day, right? You're gonna feel accomplished about that, especially if you define what the goal is ahead of time in advance. See, another big problem causing anxiety for professionals is they're actually producing a lot of value. They just don't know that they are because they never actually take the time to define what value creation inside of their sphere of influence would even look like. So by defining what your outcomes are up front, you're going to cut through the waste, you're going to get things off your plate you don't need to have, you're going to make sure that at the end of the day, you're able to actually have a sincere moment of celebration for yourself for what you've accomplished. Okay, so those are all very powerful things that you want to do. And the last and final step, once you've gotten your outcomes oriented, is you now simply need to block sacred periods of time on your schedule that are going to be dedicated to accomplishing those outcomes only. Now, of course, everybody does have to respond to other people. You do have to reach back out to clients. You do need to touch base with your supervisor, right? All of those types of things. You do have people you are beholden to that you can't just simply ignore all day. But rather than sifting through your inbox all day, diverting your focus from this to that to this to that, feeling at the end of the day like you didn't really get anything accomplished. Rather, we want to chunk your focus in distinct places where you can get into deep work, feel a sense of accomplishment at the end of it, and truly be able to make sure you have an antidote to daily anxiety for yourself. If you follow these steps and really train your brain to really implement this system over the course of the next 30 days, then I think you're going to see a very dramatically different experience for yourself work-wise. So I'm curious, what else would you add to the list, right? What ends up being a way to reduce anxiety for you in terms of your time management? I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Thanks so much for listening. I'll talk to you again in the next one.